Okay, so welcome back. In this video we're going to tackle the passport.js, and we're going to use one of its strategies that is called passport-jwt, which stands for JSON Web Tokens, so that we can actually implement the authentication logic for our project so far. So just to refresh your memory, right now we are able to exchange the email and password for a new token, but we aren't really able to say sign in using such token. So that is exactly what we're going to talk about in this video. So to get started, we first of all need to install two packages. One is called simply the passport, and the other one is called passport-jwt, as I already told you. So I'll use my commander and I'll simply go yarn add passport and also passport-jwt. And it should take a few seconds to install. Now it's done. I'm going to also start the server and have it opened in the background. So what we need to do is we actually want to create a new file that will deal with all of the passport things. So simply let's create over here a new file called passport.js, like this. And in here, first of all, let's simply get a handle on the passport, and we need to require it. Okay, and next we also want to get a reference to that strategy that we just installed, so let's call it JWT strategy, and it is going to equal require, and then the name of that package is passport-jwt, like this. But we also need to tack on strategy part, like this, and we need another piece from that, so we're going to say const extract JWT, and it is going to require the passport-jwt, like this. Okay, so now we're good to go. So what will happen is we will be using passport, but passport actually relies on many of its strategies that you can use. In our example, the JWT is a perfect match for us, so we're going to use that. And it's really quite simple, so you'll see how it goes. So first of all, we actually need to call the passport itself, and similarly to how Express uses middlewares, for example like this app.use, passport has something similar in which we can type passport.use and then specify the strategy. So we want to specify this JSON Web Token strategy, so we're going to say new and then this thing over here, like this. And now we pretty much need to initialize this, and this will take an object and a function over here. So this function is going to be async because we're trying to use it whenever we can, really. So async function is going to accept payload and done as an arguments, and it's going to be a fat arrow function like this, and we can then close this off. So now let's simply go inside of this object and make it like this, and now we need to handle these two things. So we need to handle this object and we need to handle this function. When it comes to this object, passport-jwt is really only interested in like where the token will be contained, and the second piece it is also interested in is that secret that we had over here. So we need to specify two properties over here. One is going to be JWT from request, as Visual Code suggests, and we need to say like where the token is actually going to be contained inside of that request object. And in doing so, we'll use this extract JSON Web Token, and then we're going to call the from header function. But as you can see, you can extract it from multiple of different places. However, we'll use this one, and we'll say this, and we just need to pass a name of that header. So we are going to call it authorization, like this. But you can of course call it something different if you want, but this is just like common case. And next, the passport, this strategy of passport is really interested in what secret are we using so that it can decode the token for us. And there is a property called secret or key, and then we need to specify the secret here. So we could of course like type it again, but that's not really the best approach. So we're going to simply get a reference to that. So I'm just going to quickly remind myself how we did call it. So we called it JWT secret, and it is inside of this level of directories, and then there is configuration like this. Okay, so now we have this JWT secret, and we can simply replace it over here. Okay, so now this strategy is aware of from where this token will be coming, and is also aware of what secret should be used to decode it. So great, so we are done with this object now. Now inside of this function, because we're not using, remember, like in the controllers, we were able to not use the try catch because we were using this helpful package over here, but inside of this we can't really use it, so we need to put try catch construct. And in the case of an error, we want to simply call done with error and false like this. Now in this try block, what we want to do is to actually take a data from this payload, more specifically the user's ID, to find that user and to actually return it. So let me write this. Find the user specified in token. If user doesn't exist, handle it. Otherwise, return the user. Pretty much this is what we need to do. So to find the user specified in token, we need a reference to our model user. So I'm going to come here and simply type const user equals require, and then we need to, in the same folder, there is a folder called models, and then there is a user file like this. And now if you remember, if you take a look here, we store the user's ID into this claim that is called sub, and we'll have access to this sub inside of this function over here by calling the payload.sub. So payload pretty much represents this over here. So we can get access to all of this data inside of this payload over here. So what we can do is we can simply create a new variable, let's call it user, and let's simply await user.find by ID. Now we can use that, and then we can simply pass in the payload dot sub like this. Now in case this user doesn't exist, we want to return done, but we don't want to specify any errors because really there aren't any errors, just the user doesn't exist. And then instead of this user over here that we should pass, we are going to pass the false, meaning that yeah, we're not sending back the user. And we're also using this return here, like we just called done here, but we're actually using return and then done because we don't want the code below this part to actually get executed if this is the case. We just want to exit from the entire function over here. And actually this comment is more in line to be like this. And now let's simply handle the success case, which is simply going to be done and then null for the errors and the user for the actual user. So the logic is pretty much like this. To this JWT strategy, we are saying where the token is contained and what is a secret. And inside of this function, using the secret and the actual token, Passport is actually going to decode this token for us, and we have access to this payload and done. We call done when we want to exit from this function over here, and we call or reference payload whenever we need to access to some of the token's data. So we need to first find the user specified in the token, and we simply reference the user's ID, which is stored in the sub claim inside of this payload object, and we simply try to do that. If the user doesn't exist, we want to exit from this entire function by calling done with no errors but with false instead of the user object over here. And if the user exists, we simply want to call done with no errors and that particular user. And if there are any errors, we want to call done with that errors passed and false for the user. So I hope that makes sense. And now there is one quick line of code that we need to write, and then we can actually test all of these. So I'll go back to this routes file, user.js. And what we need to do here is we need to get access to the passport. So I'm going to type const passport equals require. and then the passport like this. And then we want to find the route that we actually want to have access to only if we have a token, if we pass the token in. So remember, for the sign up, we are going to exchange the email and password for the token. For the sign in, we are again going to exchange the email and the password for the token. Just this time we're not actually creating an account, it actually exists. But for this route, say /secrets, we actually hold the token now because we are logged in and we want to access this route over here. So in this get request over here, we can write a small middleware. I mean, we're actually using the password, we're not really writing the middleware ourselves. So the passport gives us this function called Authenticate, and then we need to specify which strategy are we referring to. So we're referring to the JWT strategy, and then we can pass optional object over here, and we can simply specify that session is false because this is API, so we're not using any sessions, we're using the tokens. And then simply we can make a comma here and make this simply like a gatekeeper for this controller over here. So whenever a request comes to this /secret, it will first execute this, and then the passport will actually reference this code over here, and in case this works, like the user was found, it will allow access and actually set this user to the request.user, and in case in case the user doesn't exist, it simply wouldn't let us access this. So what we can do now is we need to make sure to save this file. I didn't thus far, and now I can come to this secret and the controller, this secret function, and let's simply console.log I managed to get here. Okay, so now let's actually try this this entire thing and see if this works. But before we do that, there is only one thing left for us to do, and inside of this routes user.js file, we did this, but we didn't actually include our file, this passport.js, anywhere. So I'm going to come here up above and simply type const passport conf, something like this, maybe for config, don't mistake that for conference. And then I'm going to say simply it is one directory up, and then there is a passport file like this. Okay, now let's give it a test. So okay, this is running. Next, I want to simply delete all the documents that I have inside of here right now, so that we have a blank slate. And I'm going to open a Postman, and let's simply start. So I'm going to go to the sign up route, and I'm going to create a new account from scratch, and this is the email and this is a password. And I click send, and we get this token. Lovely. Okay, so I'm going to copy that token, and now let's try to access the http://localhost, this one, so /user/secret. So now I'm trying to access the protected route with no token specified. So let's see what happens. I click send, and I see unauthorized, which is awesome. And as you can see, we don't see this. So this code doesn't get executed at all. Instead, the passport actually rejects that before actually entering the controller. But now I have this token copied to my clipboard, and now if I come here to headers and I type authorization and I put the value over here of this token and I try it again, this time it works. As you can see, okay, we're not responding anything from that secret, but as you can see, I managed to get here. So really quickly, what I can do is simply go res.json and then say secret resource, something like that. And now the server will get restarted, and if I try this once again, as you can see, we're able to get that secret protected resource, which is awesome. So right now we have this working, we have this part working, we have this part working, this part working over here, but we don't have this sign up thing working. and let's do that. So that should be pretty much the end of it. So we'll need to address another passport strategy. So when it comes to the sign in, we want to simply exchange the already existing user for a new token. So we need to use some passport strategy that will be able to check for us whether the user exists given the email and password that user sends, and if so, it will let us come to this controller function over here, from which we can generate a token similarly to how we did it over here. So now this will take us on a bumpy ride, because not only we'll need to use another passport strategy, but we'll also need to do some hashing and salting and verifying that the password is correct. But let's start doing that one by one. So first of all, we need to install another passport strategy. So let's do that straight away. So we're going to install a strategy that is called a yarn add, sorry, that's not the name, but it is called passport-local, like this. So now with this done, let me just start this server once again before I forget about that. And now I'll go to this passport.js file, and we'll need to do some requiring similarly to how we did it over here. So what we need to do is we need to actually now require the local strategy. So you'll see pretty much partial like repetition, and that should be good because you'll see like what is different and what is old. So similarly to how we required this strategy over here, we need to require the local strategy, which is going to equal this require passport-local. And this time we can actually use this strategy like this, and that should be good to go. So now we have this block over here, which is all about, so this is JSON web tokens strategy like this. And now we need to create a new strategy that let's call local strategy. Pretty much to configure, not create a local strategy, but anyway, so we need to come here again and go passport.use. And then we're going to say new local strategy like this, and let us pass something to this. So again, we're going to have an object, which is, you can think of that like configuration object, and then the function. The function again is going to be async one, and it is going to be a fat arrow function. And now let me scroll down a bit. So this object over here, it is mostly interested in like what should be the username. So for example, the passport local strategy by default assumes that you want to authorize user with username and password. Sorry, like saying passport and password like gets confusing. So this object over here is interested in which way you want to authorize the user, and by default this passport-local strategy assumes you want to authorize using username and password and not email and password. So we need to come here and say username field is going to be actually equal to email. So email is the name that our user actually contains. So if you come to this model over here, you see that we have email and password. So we want to say to this password pretty much like treat this email as you would treat username, and that should be good to go. Now over here, this function is going to receive email, password, and the done function like this. Now inside of this function, we need to do something similar that we needed to do here. So we first of all need to find the user given the email. So we first of all want to check whether the user with this email actually exists. So that is our first check. If not, I'm simply handle that. We'll handle it. You will see how it's done. Then in case the user is actually found, we want to check whether if the password is correct, and if not, we want to handle that as well, and otherwise return the user. So it is like the flow is pretty similar, it's just how we do it is different. So find the user given the email. Well, that's quite easy. We have this email over here and we have this user model over here, so we can come here simply and say const user equals await user.find1, because we're not searching by ID as we did here, but instead we want to find by email. And of course you don't need to type it twice, you can simply use this using the ES6. Okay, now if it isn't found, handle it. Well, we can simply check if the user doesn't exist, then we want to return done, and no error happened, but we're not passing back the user. So this is pretty much like copy paste from here. Okay, so right now we're at a bit of the crossroads, because checking if the password is correct is going to open a whole can of worms, because we need to introduce the bcrypt, and this video is getting pretty long right now, so I'm going to actually finish it over here before we actually start with this bcrypt, so that you could take a break and not really have to learn both the passport, the passport strategies, and even the bcrypt. So with that said, this is the end of this video. I hope you learned something and that you enjoyed it and that it wasn't too complicated. If something is unclear, please write down in the comments below. Like if you like it, dislike if you disliked it, and if you have any feedback, please let me know. Anyhow, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.